Rising up, here we go. No time to be afraid. They say it's impossible. Can't listen to what they say. They got me motivated. Oh yeah, I'm motivated.
Everybody, and welcome to Maximize the Business of You. I'm Maximino, and thank you for joining me today. Today, we talking finance and cryptocurrency with entrepreneur and investor Anthony Pompliano. Anthony is a co-founder and investor of Morgan Creek Capital. He's worked with companies like Facebook and Twitter. He writes his own monthly newsletter and has a popular podcast called the Pomp Podcast. Anthony, welcome.
What's going on, man? Thanks so much for having me.
Man, I want to jump right into it. For those of the people in my audience that do not know who you are, can you give us a little background on your financial journey and how you discovered Bitcoin?
For sure. Spent 6.5 years in the U.S. Army, built and sold 2 small software companies, then ran a number of product and growth teams at Facebook, was a head of growth at Snapchat for a little bit, and then started investing full-time in 2016. Literally started with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies by mining. So literally buying computers, plugging them in the wall, and mining crypto. And then from there, kind of just went down the rabbit hole, and today have invested over $100 million in the space across all kinds of companies and liquid crypto assets.
Awesome. If you could explain crypto in layman's terms, how would you explain it to people?
Yeah, so let's start with Bitcoin. Just think of money, right? It's a digital currency. The traditional dollar essentially has a very specific structure. The dollar is inflationary, which just means they create more and more of it on a periodic basis, and the value of your dollar gets less and less over time. That's why gas costs more every year, right? That's why food costs more every year. It's basically inflation. What Bitcoin basically did was said, hey, rather than governments have control over that money supply, why don't we just make it programmatic? All that means is basically it's a computer program. No one can change it unless everyone agrees to change it. So it's not going to change. And instead of making it so the goods around you become more expensive, what it did was it basically said, we're going to make the currency more valuable over time. So the cost of goods will go down. And so for me, there's basically a decision people make. There's 2 options. You can stay in the legacy financial system and you can use dollars and deal with the inflation and kind of all of the things that happen there. Or you can look at this new system. For me personally, I've got kind of my wealth distributed across both of them because I think that both of them will continue to exist in the future. But Bitcoin to me is really, really exciting. And I think that a lot of people should take the time to learn about it.
Dope. So what do you think about all the institutional money coming in? And do you think that's going to help crypto?
Yeah, if you think about technology adoption in general, right, almost all technology gets adopted by criminals and nefarious actors at first. So beepers, cell phones, all that stuff gets adopted there because there's constantly people who are trying to evade law enforcement. And so Bitcoin was no different. In the beginning, it was people doing a lot of nefarious stuff, right? They thought that they could hide from law enforcement. But the way that technology gets adopted is after that group comes in, then what you get is you get kind of the early technology adopters. And those early adopters tend to be people who are intellectually curious. They kind of look into the future. They're constantly looking at new things. Bitcoin had that kind of 2012 through 2015 or 16. And then you get kind of what I call mass adoption or the institutionalization. And that mass adoption is basically just everyday people. And so now there's tens of millions of people who hold Bitcoin, and they're not criminals, they're not early adopters, they're not institutions, they're just everyday people. And then today is where we're seeing the institutions come in. Right now you're starting to see Guggenheim, JP Morgan, Fidelity, all these huge institutions say, hey, this is interesting. We want to get exposure here as well. And I think that's what's driving the price rise recently is just a lot of institutions coming into the market.
Awesome. How would you tell someone who's brand new to this, how would they get into it? How would they invest? What would be the first steps for them?
Yeah, I think the first step is always like make sure you understand what you're investing in, right? So you got to spend the time to get educated on the various assets. And so the best place to start is usually like literally go search for the Bitcoin white paper. It's a 9-page paper. You can read it. It's a little technically heavy, but it'll give you a good sense of what's going on. And then once you kind of understand what it is, the second thing you want to do is you basically want to make sure that you invest enough money that if you lose it, you don't stay awake at night, right? So kind of invest what you're willing to lose. This is still something that is very new, it's risky, etc. And so once you kind of determine, okay, here's how much money I want to invest, then you got to figure out where you're going to go do that. And there's all kinds of different exchanges or products to use. There's Coinbase, Gemini, BlockFi. There's a ton of them. What you really are looking for is you want to go with a brand name that is used by a lot of people, right? Because there's a lot of trust there. And they also are probably regulated as well, meaning that if you use them, you won't get in trouble. And so once you decide where you're going to go do it, then basically the way to kind of acquire Bitcoin is you basically want a dollar cost average over time. And all that means is, if I want to invest $100, I'm going to take $10 every 3 days. I'm going to buy Bitcoin until I spend my $100. And that just makes sure that you don't buy it on a day where it's up really high or down really low. You're just kind of blending into the asset at an average price. And so once you know, hey, here's how much I want to invest, where I want to do it, and how I'm going to do it with dollar cost averaging, you're all set and ready to go.
Copy. How do people protect themselves and store their Bitcoin? Most people hear about Bitcoin and they think, oh, it's not, it could get hacked. And can you explain that whole situation and how they could best protect themselves?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different things you can do. It depends on how technical you are. The first thing I would say is the most extreme thing is something called holding your private keys, right? And that essentially means think of a private key as almost a password to access your Bitcoin. You can literally take control of that password and you can basically hold it on a hardware device, right? So think of it as like a USB type stick for beginners. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that after you've Googled around and tried to learn how to do that, there are custody solutions, meaning that literally there are companies that will say, hey, we're Coinbase, we're Gemini, we have the ability to hold onto it for you, and you pay us a small little fee for that. And then the third thing is that you could leave it on the exchange, right? If it's a small amount of money, then that might not be the worst situation. But I think there's two key pieces if you're going to do that. One is you have to make sure that you don't have something turned on called two-factor authentication via text message. And this is really important because when you go to a website, let's say you forgot your password, right? You hit forget password, they'll be like, oh, we just texted you a code, right? In crypto, that's really dangerous because somebody can get access to that and things like that. So we want to make sure is that you've got a username and password on a site. You want to make sure that you've got some ability to receive that two-factor authentication, not through text message. So there's applications like Google, Authy, et cetera, that will allow you to do that. And then you basically just want to use general good practices, right? Don't go to the coffee shop and type in your passwords while you're on the public Wi-Fi. But I think that all of the stuff that people read about tends to be somebody got crypto stolen from them because they did something stupid, right? Somebody WhatsApped them and was like, hey, if you send me one Bitcoin, I'll send you back two. Right. We're like, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. So you just got to be smart and kind of take precaution.
Awesome. Do you think government regulation will be bearish for Bitcoin or stifle it in any way?
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily bearish or stifles it. I think that this has been a fair concern for people to have for many years, right? It's like, well, how does the government respond to something that is outside of the system? But what we're starting to see now is actually that the government is embracing it. And so you see somebody like Brian Brooks is a gentleman who used to work at Coinbase. He now sits in and is in charge of the OCC, which essentially regulates all of the national banks. This morning he was on CNBC, and what he said on CNBC was really interesting. He goes, nobody's going to ban Bitcoin, right? We're working to make sure that this doesn't get ruined. And so I think that now that you're starting to hear people within the government say, we want to see this succeed, or we want to make sure that this kind of doesn't get ruined, I think that more and more people are going to get confidence that this will be embraced rather than kind of banned or outlawed. The big question is just when it is embraced, we have to make sure that the right steps are taken, right? So we don't want to be in a situation where The government is embracing it, but their idea of embracing it is they put a bunch of regulation on it and basically stifle innovation. What we want them to do is embrace the idea of it, but we want them to leave it as much of a free market as possible so that you allow entrepreneurs and investors and innovators to kind of keep building this future world that everyone envisions.
Awesome. So one of the things I'm excited about is NFTs. My family, we work on music, we love art, and I think NFTs promise, for artists to really benefit from their art for the first time. Can you explain NFTs and the potential of NFTs?
Yeah. So perfect example is think of a music file, right? Historically, let's say I had a Kanye West song on my computer and you said, hey man, can you send me the Kanye West song? I would literally just hit the send button. And when I send it, you would get a music file that would have that song on it. And I would have the same music on a file on my computer. We wouldn't know who had the original though, right? Did you have the original or did I have the original? And so what ends up happening with an NFT is basically the ability to have a computer file so that when you say, hey, send me that song and I send it to you, I don't still have the song and you have the original, right? So kind of the ability to prove originality. Now, for music, that doesn't make a lot of sense all the time because actually, if you say, send me the song, you want to listen and I want to listen, right? So we actually want duplicates. But take something like art, for example. You want to know that if I send you a piece of art digitally, that I sent the original file and that I don't still have it, right? And so what that does is it allows people to stop, screenshotting stuff or kind of trying to build replicas. And so when you just think of scarcity and originality, we already know that is really, really valuable in the traditional world with collectibles, whether it's Supreme, Brick Bears, you just go down the line. They're like all sports cars, all that kind of stuff. That stuff now is going to be brought into the digital world via these NFTs or non-fungible tokens. And all that just means is that when you hold that, you have the original and you know that anyone else is not holding the original. And that's really important because people are willing to pay for it.
Awesome. The art business is a big business. How big do you think NFTs could take it to, do you think it's going to stick?
Traditional art people don't like when I say this, but I've been pretty public about the idea that I think that the digital art market cap will grow to be bigger than the traditional art market cap. So if you kind of think of two things, right? Let's say that I put just a normal painting on my wall. That painting doesn't move. It's got no sound. It doesn't change based on the day of time, the season or anything. It's just a static piece of art that sits on my wall, which is great, right? But if all of a sudden I want to sell it, I have to physically take it off the wall. I've got to go bring it somewhere, whether it's an auction or I got to ship it or whatever. It's very friction heavy in terms of the traditional art world. Well, in digital art, now what people are doing is they're just putting a screen on their wall. So actually there's no photo. It's just like a TV screen. And what they can do is they can quickly change the photo on a day-by-day basis, hour by hour, seasons of the year, whatever. And then if all of a sudden, you're like, hey man, I want to buy that from you. Cool. I literally, with a couple of clicks of a button, you can pay me and I can send you the original all digitally. And so now I don't have to take it off the wall. I don't have to go ship it. I don't have to go to an auction. Like, it's such a better world. And I always tell people, name one thing that started out in the analog world that got digitized where the digital version is smaller than the analog version. It doesn't happen. That's not how technology works. And so when things get digitized, the digital versions are almost always bigger than the analog versions. And I think that's going to happen in art just as it has everywhere else.
Awesome. So you really took a big leap and started investing and working with some artists. Can you explain about some of the artists you're working with?
Yeah. So, the best example is Ferocious. So Ferocious, 17 years old, lives in Las Vegas. And when I started talking to Ferocious, it became very clear that, like, look, this person's very passionate about art. They're very, very talented. They kind of have like a pop art style to what they do. And a partner of mine and I said, look, let's commission some pieces. So we commissioned a 6-part collection that are all done in this pop art style. We're going to hold on to all of them except for one. This Sunday, actually, we're going to auction off one of them. It's of the New York skyline. and then we're going to donate a portion of the proceeds to the New York City Food Bank. And the thought process is, look, it's an awesome piece of art. It's got all the iconic, kind of locations in New York and in the skyline in the piece. And it's a way for us to kind of do some good with one of the pieces of art. But the other ones are pretty dope, and we're going to hold them, right? So the one that everyone's seen that we revealed is this Innovators Dinner. And basically what it has is everyone from Ben Franklin and Henry Ford to Malala, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Elon Musk, etc. And it's basically just over the decades, here's everyone sitting in a Last Supper style kind of scene that are innovators. And it's across industries, it's across genders, across race. And so we really, really like that piece because I think it really speaks to kind of how we look at the world, right? We're long progress, we're long innovation, and we tend to think that it doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like, or what time period you lived in. If you're an innovator, you could all sit down at dinner and get along and have a great conversation. So that piece is pretty special, and we're going to hold that one for a while.
Yeah, man. I saw it. I thought it was dope. I was like, wow, this is nice. I really enjoy that. And
I didn't get it up on the wall behind me.
You should throw it up on the wall. Where's your digital screen? You should throw that in the back and keep playing.
I've got one coming.
All right. That's what's up. So just for clarity, right? Because my family's really big in music. So you don't think NFTs will benefit music, or is it strictly for art and other kind of assets?
Yeah, so I think music plays a role in two ways, right? The first is what I'll call the intersection between music and art. So again, traditional art has always been really, really static, right? But now what happens when I can take music and incorporate it into the art? That becomes really special, and NFT is like the perfect place to do that. So I think that aspect of music is definitely going to take off. The second thing is, when you think of an artist, there's basically two things that they want to accomplish with their music, right? One is there's artists that want to get mass distribution. How do I get as many people as possible to listen to this music, right? And so for that, NFTs aren't going to serve a great purpose, because basically the whole idea of having an original is suffocating to distribution and virality and all that kind of stuff. But where NFTs and music really, really, I think, are going to take off is in doing things like, hey, you can buy an early listen to this song. Or, you know what? If you come to my concert, I'm going to have a special remix of a song that can only be bought on premise at the concert. And no one else will ever be able to buy this unless you sell yours to them. Right? All that kind of, again, originality and scarcity that we know is very valuable in the traditional world, that now can come to music. And historically, there's been no way technologically to do something like, okay, if you show up to a Jay-Z concert, Jay-Z's got a special remix that only the people who came to the concert can get access to, right? Well, now when you can do that, he can do all kinds of things. He can say, hey, I'm going to charge more for that. He can say, no, you know what? Thank you so much for coming to my show. I'm going to give it to you for free. He could say, hey, if you buy it, then that gets you access to a meet and greet. Like, there's all kinds of things that I think artists are going to eventually figure out here. But the key part just being that the technology is available. And we know, better than anything, artists are creative. And so we give them the technology. They're going to come up with all kinds of stuff we haven't even thought about yet.
Could this be something an artist puts out, album artwork with some cuts of music on it, 10 of those?
Absolutely. Imagine take an iconic album, right? Like, what's a fun one? Let's take Lil Wayne Carter 2, right? That was the first time I ever skipped school. I skipped school to go buy that CD at the store, right? The whole thing. Right. And all of a sudden, at that time, he'd been like, you know what? I'm going to take this album art and I'm going to literally auction it off. There's going to be 3 people in the world that own the original, right? I'm going to make a 3 of 3. How much would people have paid? I don't know. But they would have paid something. Right?
They paid something. Yes, I have this. Yeah. And you can prove it.
And then if you think about, like, go even further, right? So it's like that album is like relatively new, but like imagine if like the original Biggie CD, like literally like the street mixtape, if somebody was able to get the original art, right, and hold the original and prove that they had the original and it was in this digital format, that would be an iconic thing to hold, right? It would be a collectible. And so I think that all kinds of stuff like that is coming. It's just going to take time for artists and creative folks to figure out how to use this new technology to their benefit.
Great. Awesome. Now, this is a complicated one for me. I still don't understand it. DeFi. It's really big. It's broke out this year in 2020. Can you explain that? I know it's a little more complicated, but can you explain that in layman's terms?
Yeah, so DeFi literally stands for decentralized finance. The whole idea is if you think of transactions in the financial world, right? So buying and selling of anything, there's usually a middleman, and that middleman takes fees, right? Or is slow. And so if I want to send you money, normally I can't just send it straight to you. I got to send it through the bank, right? And the bank likes that because they take fees and it's relatively slow. With DeFi, what basically happens is you strip out that middleman, and now you can conduct commerce directly with other people, right? Now there's technology that does it, but the key is that nobody owns the technology. It's kind of open source and decentralized. And so my general view on this is going to be really, really big over a long period of time. People got to be careful right now because, again, a lot of the technology is new. There's issues. There's been hacks. Like it's kind of this minefield of all kinds of things. So what I tell people is like, hey, if you're interested in it, spend time reading about it, learning about it first, right? If you want to take a little bit of money and kind of play around and use the products and stuff, awesome, more power to you. Just don't go blindly and put money somewhere where you don't understand it because you simply think I'm going to make a bunch of money, right? Usually fast money ends up being no money at the end because literally the promise of fast money, there's always somebody smarter, greedier, whatever on the other side of the trade and take your money.
Awesome. You are a big advocate for personal education, personal finance education. I totally agree with you. And that's why I kind of do this show, because I feel that there's a lack of, especially in schools, New York City public schools. I grew up here. I'm in the Bronx. And growing up, we didn't get any kind of education on what we should do with money. I just, in my 30s, I started learning about money and how to invest and stuff like that. So what do you think, I guess this is a bigger question, but why are you such an advocate for personal finance?
Yeah, look, I think that the lack of financial education in our country should literally be a national emergency, right? And the way that I kind of frame it in my head is we have a world, most people consider it the rich versus the poor, right? The wealthy versus the not wealthy. And that wealth inequality gap continues to get bigger and bigger, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But when you actually look at why that's occurring, it's usually because it's an education gap. Right? Rich people know something that the bottom 50% of Americans don't know. And so if you think of the bottom 50% of Americans, basically either they spend more money than they make, right? So that they then go into debt, right? Which they can't get out of. And also they have no investable assets. They own no stocks. They have nothing. And so what you've got to learn is you basically got to learn the rules of wealth building, right? And I say wealth, not rich. Rich anymore is such a moving target, right? Getting $10,000 in your bank account versus 20 versus 30 versus 40, 10 years from now is going to look way different than it does today. And so you got to try to build wealth, not just be rich. And what I mean by that is I basically break it down into 5 rules, right? The first is you got to spend less than you make, right? How do you spend less money than you make? And that can be because you cut costs, or it can be because you go work to make more money, but you got to spend less than you make. The second thing is you got to work as hard as possible to, as quickly as possible, get out of debt. Debt is literally hanging over your head. You got to get out of the debt. You got to be really aggressive, pay it off, and get out of debt. The third thing is you got to have multiple streams of income. So if you got a regular job, great, go get a second one or go get a side hustle, do something, but get multiple streams of income. So one, you can make more money, but also two, you've got some safety to it. The fourth thing is that you got to get out of cash and you got to get into investable assets. What I mean by that is just have a little bit of money on the side for a rainy day, right? Whether it's a month or 3 months or whatever it is. So you know that if you lose your job or whatever, you got a little bit of money on the side, and then go invest everything else. You're not going to get wealthy off your salary. You're going to get wealthy by growing your money, right? And so that's the key there, is getting into investable assets. And then the last one is the hardest one, but the one that everyone just shakes their head and goes, yeah, of course. You got to be disciplined and you got to do it for a really long period of time. And so there's this saying that like everyone wants to get rich, just nobody wants to do it slow, right? But literally anyone in this country, and that's part of the American dream, anyone in this country can be a millionaire. If you make $50,000 a year and you live within your means and you put that money to work early in your life, you will end up with more than $1 million the day you retire. And so anyone can do it. It just doesn't sound that much fun when you say, hey, it's going to take you 30 years, right? Everyone wants to do it tomorrow so they can go to the club. And I think that's part of this, is just being patient and disciplined can go a long way. And so that's what I think about. Get out of debt, Go ahead and make sure you spend less than you make. You got to have multiple streams of income. You got to have investable assets, and you just got to be patient.
Awesome. Going back to Bitcoin one more time. I've been hearing a lot of talk about gold, Bitcoin. Why do you think Bitcoin is probably going to be the store of value in the future?
Yeah. So what makes both gold and Bitcoin valuable is sound money principles, right? And gold is basically the analog or the physical application of sound money principles. When it comes to Bitcoin, it's just the digital application of sound money principles. And so when you look at those two things, gold is probably going to do a pretty good job of protecting your wealth, meaning that if you own gold, your purchasing power isn't going to go down. Right. So basically, if you put $100 into gold today, you're going to have $100 worth of gold or more in the future. The difference, though, is that Bitcoin is new and it's much more asymmetric, which just means that the likelihood it's going to go up in US dollar terms is much higher. And therefore, I think that what you're seeing is a lot of young people say, hey, I got a lot longer time horizon than older people. I should actually get exposure to the thing that's more volatile, which is Bitcoin rather than gold. But they both have sound money principles behind them. And so it ends up being much better than just holding on to a bunch of dollars in your bank account.
Dope. So give me 2 books that people should, or that you recommend people should read when it comes to personal finance and or Bitcoin.
So I'll give you 4 books. 3 are personal finance, 1's Bitcoin. There's 3 books I tell everyone that they should read. It's mandatory reading if you want to build wealth. The first is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. The second one is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And the third is The Richest Man in Babylon. Those 3 books are absolutely fundamental to kind of learning the mentality and the practices behind building wealth. When it comes to Bitcoin, I specifically would say to read something called the Bitcoin Standard. It's basically a book that just lays out, hey, here's how the existing financial system works, and here's why the Bitcoin system is going to be better. But the Bitcoin Standard by Safety is a fantastic book as well.
Man, you a big hip hop guy. I know you a big hip hop guy. I see your podcast and hear you're always bringing up hip hop. Give me your top 5. Top 5, dead or alive.
Biggie, Jay-Z, Lil Wayne. Man, this is where it gets hard. I'm gonna go with. Man, I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna stop there because I don't want to say anything that people are gonna debate me on. I'm gonna just stop there. Those 3 are they take all 5 slots.
All right, that's fair. Hey, if you could go back and talk to the 20-year-old Pomp, which was not so long ago, what would you tell him to do?
Go bigger and be more patient.
Go bigger and be more patient.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, one more question. What is success, and when you think about success, who do you think about first?
So I don't think about people. I just think of this one thing, which is to be happy. And I'll give you kind of a weird way that I think about this. So everyone talks about, I want to be a billionaire, right? I want to be a billionaire. I want to be a billionaire. And I recently read somewhere that they said, well, billionaire could be a couple of different things. You could have $1 billion or you could have 1 billion minutes. And so when you think of it that way, all of a sudden, what's more valuable, $1 billion or 1 billion minutes? And what they were talking about was they said, would you do this trade? If I said to you, hey, you could be as rich as Warren Buffett. You'll get all his money. But you got to switch lives with him and you got to be his age. Would you do it? A lot of people would say, maybe I don't want to be, was he like 87 or 90 or whatever he is, right? Like maybe actually I don't want to be about to die, right? With $1 billion. And so instead, if you think, hey, I actually wouldn't trade with Warren Buffett. I would rather be myself today with less money, but have more time, then you're richer than Warren Buffett, right? And so it's just, that's happiness, right? Is understanding like, what do you want to get out of life? And can you lay down every night? And I literally do this, just say, yo, today was a good day. That's it. If you could do that more often than when you lay down and say, damn, today sucked, then you're living a great life and you're richer than 90% of people in this world.
I totally agree with you, Pomp. Man, thank you for being on Maximize. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get some value out of this. I appreciate you. I love what you're doing. Keep doing it. And people go follow Pomp. Man, thank you again, bro.
Absolutely. I appreciate what you're doing, man. I love the show.
There's no